I'm going to give some non-conspiratorial reasons that Turning Point should be scrutinized, and this pearl clutching that we're starting to see from a lot of people, especially on the more Republican side of the internet, over like Candace Owens and Ian Carroll and Jimmy Dore and like the rest of them, because they're involved in this Kirk investigation. It's just kind of ridiculous when you look at how poorly the government parties involved have handled this case, how bizarre Turning Point has acted, how I think callous the people at Turning Point have been, just being brazen profit seekers. And people are turning around and being like, oh, you can't criticize this. Candace Owens is the most evil thing in the world. And I'm not like a huge Candace Owens stan or anything, but it's kind of ridiculous. Like, yes, I will give the point that there is some sensational sensationalizing going on. Some of these people are like, I have a huge thing to share, so tune in next week when I let the cat out of the bag, which is, kind of like stringing the audience along so they tune in next week. Typical show business. But people are acting like all of a sudden this is the third rail. Like, this is the one thing in politics you can't do that with. When they didn't act like that in regards to any of like the wars, any other tragedies where basically all these political talking head types were, you know, clickbaiting, just being their usual viral content chasing selves. But if you want to talk about and then like, oh, well, Candace Owens is profiting. If you want to talk about cynically promoting yourself using this, then hello, look at the people at Turning Point, which is what this video is really about today. I want to give some reasons that you can be critical of these people, even if you're not in the, I guess, like, if you're deep in the weeds and all the conspiracies. I'm not gonna talk about Egyptian planes or whatever. I don't really all these other little, pieces that have been pulled on. But you don't need to go that far. It's like there's just been so much that is been handled really poorly, and Turning Point, regardless of their guilt in the matter, deserves such heavy criticism. And also this argument that, like, instead of using Kirk's death to further a good cause, it was used to spin conspiracies. Which, if his death had been used for something worthwhile, I would agree. Except it wasn't. The administration didn't really want to focus on it because they wanted to focus on Iran. And, a Democrat president, can you imagine if this, like, if the roles were reversed? If some, high profile Democrat had been, done in this manner? They would have 1,000% used this to smack around the right. There'd be a bunch of people in jail. Everyone in like Tyler Robinson's Discord, all their names would be public. We'd know everything about them. All the messages would probably be public. We'd be combing through everything, blaming it on all these other different factors. There'd be new rules on social media getting pushed, and they'd be trying to pass some kind of law. But it happened on the right, so they just kind of, as always, just say, oh, we're moving on. Who cares? And that's the administration's fault. That's not the fault of any podcast or anyone on Twitter or whatever. So stop acting like it is, okay? That's ridiculous. But it's on the left, we never hear the end of it. And yet we're accusing this of being some like far left plot, but no actions being taken against the far left, which makes this look a bit fake to some people. And what did Turning Point do with their founder's martyrdom? I'm glad you asked, because that's what we're going to get into. Turning Point has acted in a way that warrants such heavy criticism. For example, why could you pay to have your picture taken with Erica under the tent that Charlie Kirk died in? If that was Erica's idea, she is insane. And if that was someone at Turning Point's idea, then please give us the name of the monster that did that and also fire them. That was completely insane. Whoever's idea that was, they need to never be in front of the public eye again, and they need to leave Turning Point. And why are you mad that people don't want to support this? The pearl clutching is ridiculous because something is so obviously wrong with that. And that tent is one of the most egregious examples, but it's the tip of the iceberg. And I'm not trying to, by the way, when a political figure dies, it is reasonable to try using their death to further an ideal. Like, if something happened to me, I would hope that, if I was done in some political sense, that they would then go after the people who did that to me and further my ideals through my martyrdom. Like, I think anyone would really feel that way. Like, that's not what I have an issue with, okay? I have an issue with, well, one, they didn't really further Kirk's ideals at all, and they didn't use this to go after his enemies. Instead, like, Turning Point invited in people to fight over Kirk's legacy and sell T-shirts. Like, I don't care what Candace Owens is doing. Like, I'm far more angry at the administration and Turning Point for how, how they really, like, I hate to say squandered an opportunity, but they really didn't. They used it for things that are worthless and things that, I mean, in some ways, I think what Turning Point is really up to seems a little bit wrong to me. And what the administration's up to is definitely wrong. I mean, all we got was a war with Iran, which Charlie Kirk was against. So, but on Turning Point, I'm not really convinced that they orchestrated a murder. I think Turning Point likely has some unusual financial things going on. We know Charlie Kirk wanted to do an audit before his death, which Turning Point later lied about. This is like another thing. Turning Point keeps lying about things, okay? Like, Kirk wanted an audit. Turning Point said that wasn't real. And then the memo got leaked, and they had to admit it was true. Which, when there's a murder investigation going on, and you get caught lying about stuff, even if it's unrelated, it just doesn't look good. So don't act like, oh, you're a low IQ conspiracy person because you think Turning Point is up to evil. It's like, no, they're lying about things when they shouldn't be. Like, they're a Christian organization that's been caught in so many lies, which also is another thing. How stupid are you? Like, I feel like a piece of legal advice. I know people are criticizing Candace Owens for saying I feel too much. I will not say I feel. I affirm. Is that any different? The most common piece of legal advice is don't talk. Even if you're not guilty, don't talk. Don't talk to the police. Don't put a bunch of information out there. Don't confuse the investigation by yapping a lot, which the people at Turning Point absolutely have botched that. So it just doesn't look good. And I suspect, on the Kirk audit that he wanted, the Doge-style audit, is what the memo said. I suspect a lot of the inconsistencies at Turning Point probably fall along these lines. Like, something's being prodded at that they don't want prodded at, not because there is a secret murder there, but because there's some other shady dealing that they don't really want being exposed, so they have to act evasive, but the public interprets that as them trying to hide a murder. But anyway, there's also a lot of grifting going on. I don't know if you remember the first month after his death, but it was Grift City. A lot of people were trying to spin a story to look more heroic, and that has led to some untrue seeming testimonies. And again, this has just made fertile ground for conspiracies to run amok. Like, you can't blame the internet for finding this bizarre when you were out there saying stuff that was so weird. And a lot of them were also trying to make money, which, we'll get to, like, Josh Hammer's book in a minute, but it's like Josh Hammer trying to sell his book. That doesn't look good, okay? Like, someone who was supposed to be your friend has been murdered, and you're out there like, buy my book. He would have wanted you to buy my book. And when people see that, when regular people see that, they think, oh, that's how a murderer would act. Which I don't believe, but that's how people think, okay? You have to understand people, and you're a media company. So, you're this, like, big media, public-facing company trying to talk to the whole country. You should understand how people think, okay? I'm sure that you do. So why are you making these blunders? And I'm sure if some other political figure, like a different organization, died, there'd be a bunch of people under them trying to take their spot or ride the tragedy to a better career. I don't think that's a good thing, but I do know that's just how it is. This is a dog-eat-dog business, despite how hard they try to make it look otherwise. But let's look at some specific people. And if you disagree with me, tell me why there should be pearl clutching when these people are criticized, okay? Let's start with Brian Hartpole, which is Kirk's head of security, the one who failed miserably in his duty, okay? If you're a security guard and your charge, the person you're supposed to protect, is murdered on your watch, you have failed in your duty. You're bad at your job. Okay? And let's get into that. The roofs were not secured by his team because someone from a different organization, in this case the local police, according to Brian Hartpole, said that they would do it, which obviously did not occur, and Hartpole never checked back on this. And now, if you know anything about organizing an event, The police are not really there to protect the speaker from assassins. The police are there to direct traffic and manage the crowd and act as a sort of scarecrow to the mass of people. They're supposed to think, well, there's police here. I better be on my best behavior. It tends to make the crowds more manageable. And also, if things do go awry, there's already police there. This is why at least I know in my state, I'm sure it's the same in most of them, that you're required to have some sort of police presence at events above a certain size, especially at like a public university like UVU. And Brian Harple, I'm sure, knows this. The police are not going to be checking rooftops to protect from assassins because that's not what the police's job actually is when they are at a big event like this. They're there to manage the crowd, okay? Brian Harple knows this, and if he doesn't, he's very dumb and very bad at his job. And I don't believe that's necessarily true because he has been to a ton of these events and, guarded them successfully. So Brian Harple also said that they were banned from using security drones, which UVU has confirmed is untrue. And you can also see people flying drones that day. So I don't know why Brian Harple was under that impression. Perhaps whoever put him under that impression, that'd be worth looking at. But we don't know who did that. And I'm sure Brian Harple doesn't know who did that either. It may not even be true. So Brian Harple, though, I'm sure he realized he looked negligent here. So he went on Sean Ryan's podcast to deliver a completely psychotic story. He claimed to have jumped on top of Charlie Kirk's gurney at the hospital, cut open his shirt with scissors, which, where did he get the scissors? I know it's a kind of a random thing, but surely he wasn't carrying scissors in his pocket. Anyway, that's beside the point. But he said he did that to prepare for the defibrillator. In what world does the hospital staff just stand by while a celebrity patient whose assassin is on the loose has someone jump on top of their gurney, pull out a blade, and they just do nothing? Also, this, like I said, no one knew, what was going on at this time. So, naturally, wouldn't you think someone just jumped on top of him, the guy who just was almost assassinated? Well, I mean, he died soon after, but at this point, I believe he was still alive when he was on the gurney. Someone jumps on top of him with a blade, and everyone just kind of looks around, and it's not someone, they're not wearing scrubs, it's Brian Harple in his security uniform. Anyway, that story's ridiculous. It's obviously not true. No one else has, corroborated that story, but I go through Harple first because I feel he is the most reasonable person to be trying to sell us on a hero narrative about himself. He's a former Marine and a former police officer turned security head, which is a perfectly normal career path. A lot of people in security are former military, former police. And most of his employees are also, from what I can find, they also have similar military backgrounds. This means a team of professional security guards, most of which have military training, lost to what we are told is a gay furry electrician's apprentice with no combat-related training. So the mainstream narrative is completely career destroying for Harple, okay? You can't be some former Marine security guard losing to gay furry apprentices and expect to keep your reputation intact. So he had a reason to lie. You should never lie, but I understand in the case of Brian Harple why he was. You see what I'm saying? So he was kind of backed into a corner. And I think he tried to make it seem like his company goes above and beyond to protect their clients, which led to him saying he was, he's not a normal security guard. He's the type that, jumps on top of you and cuts open your shirt to get you ready for the defibrillator. He goes an extra mile, okay? He's more than the rest. So, but again, it's like, he's our first example of a bizarre, insane story, but the one I feel the most sympathy for. Also, Harple never explained why, despite the roofs being unsecured and drones supposedly being banned, why they didn't accept UVU's offer to use the auditorium. That was more normal for a Kirk event. It was very common for Kirk's events to be inside of auditoriums instead of just out on the campus lawn. And it was, I checked the weather records that day. It was around 90 degrees that day, so it's not like they were out there because of the beautiful weather, right? Anyway, our next figure, Nate Brooksby, the sheriff that Tyler Robinson turned himself in with, also tried spinning a tale. He made the story far more fantastical than was true. Tyler was turning himself in because he heard he was under investigation. Instead of getting swatted, he went to answer questions himself. Nate said the parents turned Tyler in because they recognized the gun, which seems to be untrue because the gun they showed on the news was not the specific gun Tyler Robinson used. Tyler Robinson used a family heirloom, and the one on the news was just a generic gun. And Nate also said that Tyler was like on the verge of suicide and had to be talked down from it by his parents, which his defense, and to my understanding, his family also, they dispute this. And this ended up confusing some of the other narratives about Tyler's family, especially about Tyler's family friend and Tyler's reasons for turning himself in. Kind of a weird look that the sheriff was doing this. Nate Brooksby stepped down from his position because of allegations of sexual misconduct and interference in a criminal investigation, neither of which are related to the Kirk case, but I suspect he knew about them at the time, and Nate was probably trying to get a good story for himself to battle these charges, but it didn't really pan out, so he stepped down. Still, he did a lot of damage to public perception, in my opinion, and the things he was claiming have only ever been claimed by him that I know of. So he was just kind of a little bit of a PR disaster for this case, and a lot of the inconsistencies people point out are because of Nate Brooksby's testimonies. Anyway, next, Terrell Farnsworth. Why did Terrell Farnsworth tamper with the crime scene and retrieve that camera footage? He claims it was in case people came to steal it, since they were stealing t-shirts off the table. Now, do you know how ridiculous this sounds? Like, there's no one guarding the crime scene. There's campus police, there's regular police, there is Kirk's, like, the security company that works for Turning Point. I was gonna say Kirk's security, but the security people who work for Turning Point, like, or just a Turning Point staff member. There's so many people that could be guarding this scene, and they weren't. So Terrell Farnsworth felt he needed to get the camera footage, but he left the camera, which the camera is far more expensive than the SD card within it. So that doesn't really make sense, does it? Okay, that doesn't make sense. And it's like, I don't know why he would have gone to get the footage, but it's just not a good look. Can't you understand why people would have a problem with that explanation? And let's go to Tyler Boyer. He's kind of my favorite one. Well, no, Victor Marks is my favorite one. We're not going to really talk about Victor Marks today because he's not super relevant to this, but he's just someone I can't look away when Victor Marks is talking. But Tyler Boyer, he's one of my favorites. In 2017, Tyler Boyer owed $11,000 from a lawsuit, and he didn't have the money to pay that, so his wages were garnished. But in 2021, he put a $250K down payment on a mansion, despite only working for nonprofits, mainly Turning Point from what I can find. So Tyler's got this amazing success story, and I find it odd that he's not more proud of this. You'd think he'd be the one writing a book. He could call it From Negative $11K to Multi-Million-Dollar Mansion in Just 4 Years, How I Profit with Nonprofits. You don't have to credit me for that book, Tyler Boyer. Okay, you can just take that title. I can't wait to read it. And the reason I bring this up is because this kind of sticks out to a lot of people because of the leaked memo that Kirk wanted an audit. And then we see kind of weird financials like this. Makes people kind of think, maybe it's stuff like this. Maybe there's some sort of fraud going on because some people at Turning Point are getting very rich. And a common motive for a murder is, typically something money related. And if someone's going to uncover your financial crimes, it would make sense to do something about it. Now, I'm not saying that is my position, but that's the position a lot of people online have. And it's not a completely, obscene thing to think because these financials don't really make sense. The Wolves in Finance have some great videos about the finances at Turning Point. It's very bizarre. It's really worth looking at. Anyway, now let's look at Josh Hammer. He had a new book, and if Hammer's telling is to believe, all Charlie Kirk wanted before his death was for people to buy this book. And Hammer really wanted to make sure that you did not forget this. Hammer brought this up as much as he possibly could in the months following Kirk's death, which is just more macabre nonsense. from someone at Turning Point. And it just makes it look like you only care about money, and it looks bad, okay? It looks really bad. And not that, it's like, again, this is kind of maybe people not understanding that media is full of psychopathic people who are not really smart, they're not talented. The only thing they're really good at is being psychopath ladder climbers who will do anything to, anything to make it. So naturally, when these people are around someone who has died, they're going to try to use that death in the most cynical way possible. And to regular people, they're like, oh, that's gross and insane. That's how a murderer acts. Now, unfortunately, I'm familiar with some psychopath ladder climbers myself. I am not one, obviously, as you can see from my 7 subscribers. But this, I know that's how it is, so it doesn't shock me so much. But a lot of people who don't they find it very uncomfortable the way these people behave. Anyway, next point. Why is Erica's ex-boyfriend, Cabot Phillips, doing a Lead Like Charlie tour? I don't have a lot to say about that other than it's just kind of another tacky grift that looks bad. It also doesn't look good that Erica and Cabot seemingly tried to cover up that they had a relationship, and the reason people found it is like Twitter replies that had like quoted what they'd posted, but they had to they'd long since deleted the original stuff. Just kind of looks weird. Also, Lead Like Charlie tour. Like, it's tacky. It's real tacky. Like, these people are always doing something tacky. Anyway, let's approach the real third rail, which is Erica Kirk. She's a PR disaster. Quit acting like don't act like she is some private citizen that's being randomly tortured. She chose to be CEO, okay? You can be the grieving wife, or you can be the CEO. But if you're going to be the CEO, you're going to be subject to a lot of criticism, okay? Like, I think everyone should accept that. And Erica has not really done a good job of making herself immune to criticism. Something that I personally kind of have a big gripe with is, why did she tell the world she forgave someone who's claiming to be innocent? This was still when the main narrative was like Tyler Robinson turned himself in because he was like racked with guilt. And then Erica goes up there and says, I forgive him. When in reality, Tyler was at that time claiming to be innocent, as he's maintained the whole time. It doesn't mean he is innocent, but that's what he's been claiming. And if someone's claiming to be innocent, don't go up there and say, I forgive him. That's not a compassionate thing to do. That's actually he's lying, I think Tyler's guilty. That's what you're really saying. And you're trying to dress it up like it's some kind of Christian moment when really you're on the offensive there. I don't appreciate that. Anyway, why was Erica lying about Fort Huachuca? I think the Fort Huachuca thing is one of the weaker points because there's no way to really confirm, unless we got like their security footage, which we never will. There's really no way to confirm if it's true. So I think Erica should have ignored questions about this. But, and again, like these people can't stop doing, they're so bad at PR. So she says that she's never been. Like, why'd you answer this? So she said she's never been, but it turned out she filmed a movie there. Okay? Like, come on, Erica Kirk. Like, this is the sort of thing that I really can't get over. They lie about pointless stuff. She should have ignored this, and she should have ignored so many other things. But she said she'd never been, which was not true. It's like the Egyptian plane things, which I don't think is a strong piece of evidence. But when asked about the Egyptian planes, Erica should have said, I don't know what you're talking about, or not responded. And instead she said, I was pregnant and I just wanted to eat burgers. And the insinuation, I guess, is that she was too busy being pregnant eating burgers to fly on a plane. But we have the flight records, and she did fly on her plane, like on the plane while pregnant. So I don't know why she said that, but she did say it. That was her response. Anyway, she just can't help but make blunders. And I do have sympathy for her. Like, she's just a strange person, and it's made worse by her Botox or whatever it is, which makes her expressions look very unnatural, which is pretty common for women like her. But it hasn't really helped with her public perception because, you're kind of stiff-faced all the time despite the situation. and people think that you're just like a callous, cold monster, when really it's probably Botox, but whatever. They never should have made her the face of Turning Point. She's just not cut out for that. And at the very least, an interim CEO would have made a lot more sense. They should have done that for a month. She could have been in private for a month, and she would have dodged so much of the public backlash, and she could have reappeared as a calm, collected figure ready to lead, and her lack of emotion would have then been interpreted as a kind of the stoicism of a girl boss CEO instead of the aloofness of a widow who doesn't care, which is how she was interpreted. Okay. But I've got a reason for thinking they weren't able to do that. But anyway, she appeared a few days later. We'll get to why I think that didn't happen. But she appears a few days later and seems fine, which people did not like. They found that very unsettling. And then there's that Zoom call link where she's like, that Zoom call leak, I'm sorry, where she is so happy about t-shirt sales like 5 days after Charlie's death. And now people think she killed her husband because of how she was acting. All of that could have been avoided if she just stayed out in the public eye for a month. But what do I know? But here is one conspiracy I will be peddling, okay? My personal conspiracy is I don't think she was intended to be CEO. And I think she decided to take the crown herself. This would explain so much if you really think about it. This is why there was so much turmoil at Turning Point, and why so much of the executive staff was seemingly gunning for Charlie's spot. If you recall that first week especially, like they were all trying to market themselves as the true heir. You even had like Brylan Hollyhand. I don't know how this was pulled off, because I've looked into Brylan Hollyhand quite a bit, and his family is, they've got, a few million, but they're not like make the president say something wealthy, at least not from what I can find. But Trump, in his first address about Kirk, went out and like name dropped Brylan Hollyhand, talk about this kid that Kirk met with in the 4th grade, which was, seemingly. And Brylan also appeared on like Fox News that day, that infamous like Charlie Kirk is dead banner with his face on it. We might do a video about Brylan Hollyhand at some point. I'll show you that there if you haven't seen it. But like you had that guy coming out kind of trying to market himself as young Kirk. And like, the amazing Mikey McCoy, that was all to like try to make Mikey McCoy seem like the next Kirk. Andrew Colvett seemed to want the spot. Like these people it didn't look good. And I don't think that would have happened if Erica had like seamlessly taken her spot. If they all knew it's going to be Erica, there's nothing to fight for, I don't think they would have done that. And I think Erica kind of took the opportunity against the wishes of the other people at Turning Point and became CEO. Which, Turning Point, of course, claims that it was all smooth and it was all easy. But you had like Andrew Colvett was leaking to Candace Owens that first week, if you recall, and that has really messed up a lot of their PR that he did that. And I don't think he would have done that if Erica had like smoothly taken the spot. Anyway, on the topic of Erica being CEO, how insane is it to think that Charlie Kirk was like, women should not focus on a career, being a girl boss is feminist, leftist, propaganda, or whatever. And then we were also supposed to believe that he thought, if my job is so dangerous that it kills me, I want my wife to have my job next. Like, that would make a lot of what he said about women very ironic, and that just kind of looks insane. And also, like, in the corporate will, it doesn't say he wants her to be CEO. I believe it says that he wants her to get $10 million, which, fair. And, she gets $10 million. She gets the percent of the company that he owns and, everything else that he owns, basically. This is kind of a side point. Why, I don't have a lot to say about this, but why did Tucker do a fundraiser for Erica Kirk, like, which raised millions, if I recall? Like, she's a millionaire. She inherited millions from Charlie Kirk. Her family's wealthy. I'm sure he had a huge life insurance. Like, why was Tucker running a fundraiser for her? Like, that was just kind of weird. Like, having a lot of, like us plebeians donating money to this millionaire woman. It's just kind of strange, Like, if you want to support the cause, you would donate to Turning Point. But the thing to donate to Erica directly was, did quite well, which I don't have any kind of, I guess I don't really have much to say about it other than I just found that kind of odd. Like, whose idea was that? Anyway, it doesn't really make sense that Charlie would have wanted her to be the CEO. That's kind of weird. But let's talk about how the organization is being run. And this is like the biggest reason not to support these people is how badly they run Turning Point. So first, the YouTube channel. Imagine being a Charlie Kirk fan and getting constant notifications that say Charlie Kirk's uploaded a new video. Like, same with his Twitter. Like, you're getting these notifications that Charlie Kirk is uploading things, but you know that he's dead. So it's just kind of, it's weird, you know? Like, please change the name on the socials. That's not a normal thing to do. When someone dies, perhaps a memorial video is uploaded, and then the account is no longer active, or the name is changed. That would make sense too. You know, his like his Facebook and such, it needed to be deactivated, and his show should have been renamed. And any sane person would have done this, in my opinion. Anyway, on to the next point. Turning Point raked in millions following Kirk's death, and then they fired a bunch of staff, which is kind of a weird and gross thing to do. Terrible PR, as always, from Turning Point. It's like, you make them work so hard during the chaos following Kirk's death, and then you fire a bunch of them. And so they knew this was terrible optics. So after this was like received so poorly, they're like, oh, we had to do it because of Candace Owens. Like, there's Candace Owens again, the devil herself. And they said that they had to do it because they had like Candace Owens spies in their mix, which, no. And also, it's not a reason to fire a bunch of your staff that have worked so hard for you and, you know, got traumatized with you. And of course, this created a bunch of rightfully disgruntled employees who are now very happy to smear Turning Point all over social media. So a source of endless bad optics has been created by your own blunder. And also, if you want, like, the worst thing about them saying that it's like somehow Candace Owens' fault is that Candace Owens still continues to get leaks from Turning Point, meaning they failed again. Like, nothing involving security in Turning Point seems to work. Like, your former military security guards lose to a supposed gay furry, and your internal security is being outsmarted by some intern that you can't figure out who it is. Come on, okay? It's like, these people look so inept. And this is kind of like my last point, and I feel this is one of the most damaging ones, is Charlie Kirk's text. Why did they lie about the Charlie Kirk text? Like, saying that he thought someone was trying to kill him. I think the reason they lied about it is because they didn't want to have conflict with his donors, and they were probably trying to save face because they want to keep these donors, but they should not have lied. Because if he said like that, if the text about him being mad with his donors were shown publicly, and also the text about him being worried about being killed were shown, naturally people would suspect the donors. The donors would not like that. They'd probably pull out of Turning Point. So I think Turning Point had a incentive to lie here. They shouldn't have done that. That did not look good. Someone at the FBI ended up leaking those texts, which looked really bad, okay? And I think that's probably the most damning thing they've done in the eyes of the public. It just looks so guilty. So, you know, I don't really think there's anything wrong with being critical of these people. Like, there's so much strange to look at here. And there's so much that doesn't make sense. There's so much they're lying about. And it's not like we're questioning a group of historic truth tellers. Like, this is the government. They lie about everything. Like at least in my lifetime, they lie about everything. Like, you know, if you lie all the time, people don't believe you anymore. So you're not some crazy person for not believing the words of a liar. And they're like, low IQ conspiracy theorists. Like, obviously it's Tyler Robinson. A perp is gonna walk free because of Candace Owens. It's like, no, if he does walk free, it's because no one believes in the government anymore. Like, no one believes the police, the FBI. They don't trust anything you say, and that is your fault. You need to be working to restore your image with the public instead of getting mad that people think you are liars. And on Turning Point specifically, I mean, all these things I listed, and there's like hours more of like little things they've lied about, little things that don't really make sense. they're kind of too deep in a lot of lies at this point to look like a good organization. And it doesn't help that they're trying to like claim to be Christian, okay? So it just looks really bad. Anyway, give me a like and a subscribe. I'd love a comment as well. I would really love a comment, actually. Maybe something else that y'all want to talk about. And I think the next thing I want to talk about is Tucker's 10-point plan. And that's what the next video is going to be on. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.